It looks as though growing weed also results in growing some jobs. Talk with us about what this new report is showing us about the number of Americans who are working in the cannabis industry.
Yes, well, it's just definitely more common than we are really probably willing to admit. A new report reveals that there are nearly 500,000 people in America right now that are now employed full time in the cannabis sector. This is the result of more states that have come online and beginning to mature. And this report is published annually by Leafly. Leafly is a company that really has made a transition throughout the industry. I'll be honest, I started off knowing about Leafly just as my search engine when I wanted to figure out what a strain did or maybe what it felt like. They have compiled what amounts to millions of qualitative feedback from users in order to, really come up with profiles for each of these strains. So if you want to know about lemon haze, you can go to Leafly. But over the time, they've also gotten a lot more data, and so they've become more of a data analysis, a data bank. They actually have an Asian woman, Yoko Miyashita, as the CEO, and they were part of a large conglomerate. I tell the backstory here because it does I think often get lost in the cannabis industry that people have been around for a while. They often reinvent themselves in order to stay relevant and beat the volatility of the industry. And Leafly is a perfect example of a portfolio brand that got let out on its own and has been thriving in the analytics and industry report kind of world. So you can get this report, and it's significant because the data I got from this, Lurie, was really eye-opening on how prevalent cannabis actually is in the United States. Last year, the industry created more than 100,000 new jobs. Even though COVID, people don't want to go back to people don't want to go back to the office, but they want to go into the cannabis industry for sure. And this is compared to the previous years in 2019, just over 30,000 jobs, and then over 75,000 jobs in 2020. So seeing this growth year over year, while other industries are struggling to find workers at this point. And I'll just also lastly say that I was shocked to see sort of where cannabis stacked up compared to other industries. Of course, you start with health professionals, and I think people feel these are the most important jobs in a society, if you will. And so there are more people working in cannabis than there are dentists, okay? So, and then, but then as you start talking about sort of everyday jobs, there are more cannabis workers than firefighters or bank tellers or hairstylists and cosmetologists. And
okay, now what?
Exactly.
Oh, my God.
Exactly.
So this is not just a growth opportunity for the cannabis. This is a growth opportunity for employment metrics.
Well, naturally, the jobs are more prevalent where cannabis is legalized. But medical markets are fairly large, too. Florida is a medical-only program established, but it is making money hand over foot, and the companies there are quite large, and they are boasting large, HR strategy and employment recruitment. But, all of the industry is still volatile. So the largest company, for example, in Florida is Trulieve, and the CEO's husband was convicted of bribery at the federal level and is serving time right now. So it's like there's this little bit of just you don't really know when you're going in. The turnover rate at the senior executive level, just to be perfectly fair, is very high, especially if you're a person of color. But if you're coming in and you are more your college or your high school and you're looking for at the trades, this is one of those trades that you can get into in legal markets. In Oregon, it's only $100 to get your marijuana workers permit, which means you can work in any dispensary. And my program, the Social Equity and Educational Development Program, funds another organization that actually gives scholarships for that $100. So if you can't afford that, you can still work in the industry. The other thing I will lastly say is that the workers' diversity is where you see any industry diversity. We're about to talk about this later, but the fact of the matter is if you want to see Black and brown people, odds are you're going to see them among the ranks. likely not in the C-suite. We talked about what the C-suite looks like, primarily white men. And, that is something that I think we're starting to track more closely, like who's at the helm and what does leadership look like.
This is why we need you, Dasheeda. This is why every single week. Remember when you was only on once a week or once every other week? And we was like, oh, that's plenty of time to cover what's happening. Nope. I feel like you might need to be even more. This is why, because there's so many shifts and changes, and we need to be clear about what's happening because it does present a lot of economic opportunities. And then there also have been a lot of shifts and changes with what's happening with state and federal regulation. Are we seeing some movement in spaces that perhaps we should be paying attention to?
1,000%. It is a quick state and federal update. I'm definitely trying to figure out how to cover this over the next few weeks because there's going to be a lot of changes. We see session is starting to end for that's essentially what we saw at the end at caucus this weekend. Session is starting to end, so we're starting to see the results. And we want to talk about it. How does it impact it? What do you do for next session? How do we prepare? And sometimes, even though marijuana is a movement, sometimes it's not a movement in the direction that we need it to go. And so I'm going to kick that off with the wrong direction, shouting out Louisiana House Bill 700. This is a bill that legitimately is intended to put incarceration back into a decriminalization law. So Louisiana decriminalized. Here's the backstory, right? They actually have a U.S. Senate candidate, Gary, oh my gosh.
Chambers.
His name is slipping me right now.
Gary Chambers.
Thank you so much. I just met an awesome guy. And he has smoked a blunt on one of his political campaigns, mainly because he wanted to highlight that in Louisiana in particular, but across the country, many people are still getting arrested for cannabis possession, not sale, possession. And Louisiana is one of those states. On the cover of one of their really big newspapers, they talk about how much money they're making in the medical program, and at the same time, literally right on the same page, showing the big marijuana bust that the police department had recently made. It doesn't make sense, and we're still seeing racial disparities, huge ones, in Louisiana. This law is intending to not only put back incarceration, but Lurie, this is what hurt my heart the most, and this is why we got to pay attention. It's for people under 18.
What?
Yes. So we fought this in New Jersey. We've got to fight this, what I call recriminalization, and in particular around underage use.
Now, I got to pause you right here, Dasheeda, because we just, maybe 2 weeks ago, it couldn't have even been that long, I had 3 reporters on who had come together and collaborated on a report for ProPublica that was looking at incarceration of juveniles in the state of Louisiana. And if y'all remember that conversation, it was devastating. And this bill, am I to understand from what you just said, this bill is seeking to criminalize cannabis possession by teenagers and people who are under the age of 18?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
See, but we also know that Gary Chambers has taught us is that if Black Louisianans, is that what y'all call yourselves? I don't know what you call yourself if you live in Louisiana, but if you are Black and if you were living in Louisiana, if you were voting at the levels that you could be in terms of registration and population, you could run the tables on these types of policies and elections, because you know whose babies is going to get locked up, Dasheeda. It's going to be babies that look like you and me. It is not going to be white folks' children that's getting locked up behind this legislation.
Absolutely. They already have huge racial disparities. So what is to convince us that this would change somehow? It wouldn't. And so we have to block every effort to recriminalize cannabis. It doesn't matter what horror stories they try to come up with, how much they try to tell you that it's going to harm your children's brains. At the end of the day, being put through any type of penal system, prison system is more harm than anybody's cannabis on the brain. And we can argue whether or not that's even valid from a scientific perspective at this point. And so, I was really devastated, just to give people an idea of what that means, because, it's not necessarily hard time, but we do understand that people spend a day in Rikers Island and it changes their whole life. So we're not trying to send our kids to prison at all. Period.
Exactly.
Not for a day, not for 10 days, not at all. Yeah.
And from the notes you had shared, there was an article that you had shared in the notes that said this would be the first offense would be incarceration for up to 15 days. That's 2 weeks and a day. Did I read that right?
Indeed, you did. You
Jesus.
did. And then progressively increasing with time over additional reps. So you get caught one time, it's at 15 days. You get caught another time, it's, now we're talking about months. And then before you know it, you're spending 2 years. There's also some fines associated as well. Meanwhile, adults don't have to worry about this. This makes no sense at all.
Wow.
Furthermore, should you not be maybe criminalizing the people that are selling to the children if you have to criminalize at all? I don't necessarily support that either. However, because it could be a 19-year-old dealing with a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old dealing with a 17-year-old.
Right.
I don't support that either. I feel like those loopholes still wind up really impacting our communities most adversely. But this is completely unacceptable, and recognize that even though it's happening in Louisiana, the next state we're going to talk about, we blocked it happening in Democratic New Jersey. There's still this belief that the best way to protect our children is to send the police after them, and I couldn't disagree more, especially having an 18-year-old son myself, and I even can't even imagine the thought of him interacting with the police simply because of smell, again, and all of these assumptions that go along with cannabis possession.
Wow, that's insane. That's just absolutely insane. But again, if you weren't here to tell us about it, we wouldn't know. If you were in Louisiana right now and you knew about this, let us know if you knew, because I'm willing to bet you probably didn't know or didn't necessarily have all the dots connected. That's one of the reasons why we continually bring on the experts, because now y'all can do something. You can call your local Louisiana state representatives, all of them in the House and the Senate, your upper and lower chamber. I actually don't know how Louisiana's state government is structured. I know they have a slight nuance to their legal structure as well. But whoever represents you in Louisiana, which you should know because our first power work assignment was to figure that out and get their information in your phone, you need to let these people know, hell no, you don't get to criminalize our babies again. And we already are dealing with an over-criminalization of black youth in Louisiana as it is, as evidenced just by the number of reports and articles that come out from outlets like ProPublica that describe these horrors in detail. So I'm so glad that you alerted us to this south of the Mason-Dixon line approach to cannabis criminalization. Are we seeing anything in the northern portion of the country that we should be aware of?
We are in New Jersey now nearly 18 months after New Jersey residents voted to legalize cannabis. I was one of those residents. The New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission has finally approved 7 already existing medical cannabis companies to start selling adult use.
Wow.
This is really timely because I don't know if you remember just a few weeks ago we were talking about Senator Nick Scutari deciding he was outraged that the industry hadn't opened yet and he was going to be investigating and opening a special committee in order to do the investigation into why there was a delay. And now we are seeing that delay has gone away. I will also say that it isn't just that they get started right away. They had to show that they could actually meet the demand of the medical market that exists and expected demand of the adult use market that would be added. And if they don't maintain being able to meet both, they could meet up to $10,000 a day in fines based on their inventory. So there's some mechanism happening behind scenes that they're regulating or keeping people compliant with inventory levels so that they don't run out. That was a big issue in other markets where, like in Illinois, you could get something November, December, and if you're a monthly repeat user, once they legalize in January, you come back in January and they don't have your medicine. And I know, having a chronic illness myself, that can be very devastating to try to figure out, scramble how you're going to get by without what you're using to maintain your regimen. So this is exciting news. Now, one of the things I will point out is it is the usual suspects. So when you don't ask, well, what's the black people that's actually involved here, there really are none.
That was my next
these
question.
Are previous medical cannabis companies. And there's a big one, Acreage, Ascend, which is making, a purchase now happening in New York, Columbia Care, Curaleaf, Green Thumb Industries, TerraScent, and Verano are the companies that have been, already established here, and they can operate up to 3 dispensaries. And some have already talked about their strategies. Like Green Thumb Industries is saying, hey, one dispensary is just going to be medical only. Like you can't go there if you're trying to do adult use. But the 2 that are pretty close to New York, they're going to be adult use. And so It should be interesting because remember, they got New York and they got Philadelphia that are both medical only, and they are adult use coming in New York but not really having enough product yet. I see these companies being able to reap the benefit of that in the coming weeks.
Oh, wow. See, again, once again, I'm glad for New Jersey. And I believe we've had a representative from Curaleaf on this show at about this time last year. So shout out to them. Is there any insight as to when some groups of color are going to be able to get a foothold in New Jersey? It feels like we're sort of like at the precipice and we just haven't quite made it over to the finish line. Is there any insight as to when that might be happening?
Well, just a few weeks ago, we talked about here on Flowers to the People, the licenses that were provided as conditional. So that's the reason why Senator Scutari decided to go into this research of what's happening, because rather than do this approval a couple weeks ago, New Jersey's Cannabis Regulatory Commission decided to go ahead and approve conditional licenses, of which there were quite a few, I believe it was like 40%, that were Black owned or Black affiliated. And, the numbers on these things, because of course it's optional if you want to share what your details are always interesting, but they are tracking. They do have an office that's supposed to provide some reporting. We're still news, at 11 on when we will get a report out, but partly it's because the licenses are just now starting to be, sent out. Those were from the December 15th. So, but that group is going to take about a year, maybe, to get up and running. That group was mostly cultivation and processing and not retail, so you can't buy from that group. That group is a foundation, and in the next couple of months, we'll hear who are the retailers that they've given licenses to.
Okay. It's a process, and a process made a lot easier to understand when you walk us through it. We only have just a moment or two left. It feels like I kind of want to get to this High Times Top 100 really quickly. Are you featured in this? I feel like you should be in any awards or recognition of anybody active in the cannabis industry. I feel like Dasheeda Dawson should be at the top of the list. What's happening with High Times right now?
So I'm excited around the High Times Top 100. So y'all know High Times, that legacy magazine. I was shocked to realize that High Times was founded in 1934. So it's nearly 50 years old, but it's only been doing this list since 2017. And it had to take a hiatus during the COVID period. So it brought it back for the 2021 list. And yes, y'all, your girl is on the list.
What?
I was really thrilled to be recognized. I was very excited as well. And I'm on the list with people that I do respect. Cassandra Federico, who's been, like you said, here multiple times. Chris Alexander, Leo Bridgewater, and Jessica Gonzalez, Al Harrington, and Chanel Lindsay are multiple. Chanel is the CEO of the decarboxylator that we talked about. So a lot of familiar names, but still, I will say, less than 30% were people of color and or women. So that means the majority of the list, more than 70%, were white men, because they listed almost every CEO of these really big companies that I just mentioned. And so, we're still seeing that trend, but I'm excited to break through. I think the universe has me in the exact spot that I'm supposed to be on this journey, and it feels good to be recognized.
Well, as you are journeying, and we are so proud of you, I feel like we need a T-shirt. Dasheeda Dawson is on the list. We need something to promote that. As you continue your journeys, where will you be over the next days and weeks? You're not going to actually be here on 420, so we won't get to celebrate that day together. But where will you be between now and the next time you come back to the Lurie Daniel Favor Show?
I keep promoting the fact that I'm headed to D.C. for the National Cannabis Policy Summit. The reason why I'm promoting it is because it's free on Friday, 4/22, April 22nd. It's in D.C. It's at the Ronald Reagan Building. It is free. If you're in the area, DMV, this is what you don't want to miss. It is some of the most influential people in policy in discussion. I'm on a panel, but I also just found out that I'll be giving the keynote address for the closing reception. So the final thoughts of the day around policy. I'm very excited about that. And so whenever there's a time people can come out for free to hear great debate, because there will be debate, listen, I'm on a panel with people who are very much blindly pro a banking bill, but do not understand how it's creating equity issues. I plan to bring the receipts and the numbers, but we'll close out with some inspirational thoughts at the end. And I want everyone to hear it And then, of course, if you stay in town, the next day is the largest festival in the country related to cannabis, the National Cannabis Festival, and it has Wiz Khalifa, Slick Rick, and Ghostface Killer. That alone, I'm excited.
Wow. Dasheeda, man, I love you, sis. You stay keeping us focused on what really matters. It's more than just the puff, puff, pass. It's all about pass the cash, okay? It's about the economy. It's about the moolah, baby. So I'm so glad that we have you here. Lord knows I would not be able to keep all this straight without your expertise, and the world needs more people who can missionary around this topic the way that you do. Thank you so much for being back with us. How do people follow you and connect with you if they're not already? And if you are a longtime listener, quite frankly, if you're not already following Dasheeda, this is shameful. How do people connect with you, sis?
A lot of people are connecting with me, Lurie, on Twitter and on Instagram at Dasheeda Dawson. They're also checking out theweedhead.com. So, yeah, people are connecting. I see you. I hear you. I try to connect back as quickly as I can. Forgive me if I don't right away. But, yeah, those are the best ways. And then, of course, you can always find me on LinkedIn.
Dasheeda Dawson, our own personal cannabis czar. She just also is an official cannabis czar as well. We so appreciate you. Thank you for being with us today. Walk good, sister. Walk good.